Hello, everyone. And inside today's Locked On Canadiens, I have a very special guest for today's show. We're going to talk Caufield contract. We're going to talk mock draft and so much more inside today's show.
Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 843 of Locked On Canadiens. It may look like I am flying solo for today's Locked On Canadiens podcast. Remember, your Montreal Canadiens podcast, every day part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Find us wherever you get your daily podcast or on YouTube if you like my bright and shining face. I am not alone today. I brought a guest. My co-host is out for the evening, so it is up to me to not burn this show to the ground. And I am always happy to welcome back good friend of the show, Ian Boisvert of the Build Podcast. Ian, thank you for making time for myself on Friday night. I'm sure Laura thanks you as well. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up, but how are you doing first and foremost?
Yeah, I think I've recovered from watching Chicago win the draft lottery, but I think other than that, things are good. It's been too long. It's nice to be back on here.
And we have big plans for today's show. The back half of today's episode, we are doing a mock draft 2.0 because we are complete sickos and that is what we live for. But the biggest news kind of still lingering around Montreal right now is not the draft lottery. Well, kind of the draft lottery if you are into panic, which if you are, go watch my episode that I recorded Tuesday night for Wednesday where I just told you everyone to relax for like 5 minutes. It's fine. It is literally the middle of May. We don't know who they're picking. Everybody calm down. No, the other news is Cole Caufield. And on Twitter today, a lot of discussion because the NHL Watcher account, someone who doesn't break news, but, transcribes a lot of radio hits, articles, and things that are important, mentioned that Cole Caufield is in a similar situation to Tim Stutzle of Ottawa Senators fame and flopping on the ice infamy. If you were Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens, because Stutzle got signed to 8x8 or whatever it is, would you take that for Cole Caufield, with the caveat being Caufield is likely a better pure goal scorer, Stutzle is a more well-rounded player, or do we still think they want to come down under that 8 mark and come in at like 7.5, and will this get done anytime soon?
Yeah, I think so. I think Stutzle comes in at 8 years, but it's 8.13 something. There's a bunch of other nonsense added on there. Like you said, Stutzle definitely more of a well-rounded player. He had 39 goals this year, which is probably right around where we think Caufield should be on an annual basis. But he also added 51 assists, which is something that, as much as I love Cole Caufield, I don't know if he has 51 assists in him. Also, too, you have to realize Tim Stutzle, the way he creates offense is very individualistic. He can do things on his own. And not to say Cole Caufield is entirely dependent on his line mates, but he needs a facilitator to get him the puck. His biggest talent is his shot, right? His shot is deadly. The release is elite. You know, I think it was smart of Caufield and Brisson if they started off with that number, right? Because you don't start off with where you ultimately end up, right? Because every team is going to try to pull a player's number down a little bit. So if he comes in at that number and the Canadiens came in, with here's Suzuki's contract, and they'll probably meet somewhere in the middle. I think 7.5 is reasonable for a player who has, maybe 50 goal upside. I don't think that's out of the question.
Laura and I have talked about this, that we both think, we know he has 40 goal upside. He would have hit 40 goals last season had he not. He was playing with a separated shoulder and doing what he did, which is both stupid and impressive. It's stupid impressive, as the kids these days say. And that is my thought, is they can't pay him much as Suzuki because he's not a center, and as we know, wingers tend to get a little bit less money unless you're Mitch Marner. And at the same time, it's like you said, it's not that Caufield cannot create on his own. Some of it, everything comes out of his shot and finding those soft spots in the ice.
Mhm.
I don't know how teams allow Caufield to operate in that kind of space, but they do. And it blows my mind that they allow this to happen because he's so talented at what he does. But at the same time, if you're paying him more than your captain, we already know how the narrative is going to go on that. Oh, do they not value Suzuki? Are they sure they want to make? We know how stupid it will get on the other side of this, but I like your thought that you aim high, you start high, and you slowly kind of work to meet in the middle here. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in, like you said, 7.5, 7.75. I think he's also worth that, especially if you get term on the deal. And that is the biggest thing out of all of this. They need to get term on this deal. Because if they go, let's say 3 years and that cap rises exponentially and Caufield continues this pace, his next contract after that is going to be humongous big.
Yeah.
Like almost unkeepable potentially, depending on the rest of the Canadiens lineup there. Getting term on this can give you, and I swear to God, I hope no one takes this as this. Look at what Nathan MacKinnon did in Colorado. That contract he got before this past one was ridiculous.
Yeah, robbery.
Which thanks Patrick Waugh for, tanking Nathan MacKinnon's will to live and everything else. But if you can get Caufield on that long-term deal, and that's the biggest thing, get term on this. Caufield is worth the term. He is one of your, and I'm going to steal this from AEW, he's one of your 4 pillars on this team here. You have Suzuki, you have Caden Gooley, you have Cole Caufield, and then is that Kirby Dach? Is it your pick this year? Is that going to be Slavkovsky in the future? Keep that core together as long as you can and let them grow together, because that's how you get, quite frankly, championship teams out of it.
Yeah. And that idea that he can't make more than the captain, that's going to have to go away fast, because if Montreal is, if they do what they're supposed to do with this draft pick and they do what they're supposed to do with the ones that they've already made, there are going to be players that come up that are going to be worth more annually than Nick Suzuki is currently. That's not a slight at Nick Suzuki. Love the guy. He signed that contract. That dollar amount is not going up or down until it is over. If Lane Hudson hits the way that we think he's going to hit, we're talking about a Cale Makar-esque contract, right? Like if Slavkovsky hits the way that they expect him to hit, that's another big contract. So like this idea that your captain sets the bar for how much you're supposed to pay all of your other players, I don't subscribe to that belief. And I don't think like Nick Suzuki's going to look at his teammates getting paid more than him and get upset, right? That's why he's wearing that C, is because they think that he's the kind of person who would set all those things aside. Now, with Caufield, this is a question that I've been thinking about, that's been asked a lot. Does the shoulder injury bother you? Like, are you worried about that long term? I'm personally not, but I'm curious to see what others think.
Do you know why I'm not?
Hmm.
Because on the team is a guy who went through the exact same surgery and, while inconsistent, hasn't had shoulder injuries. He's had, an ankle injury, or this is Josh Anderson. And I look at Josh Anderson this past season, after some injuries the previous years, his shoulder seems to have held up fine. His consistency on the ice is not a factor from his shoulder injury. He shoots the puck pretty damn well still.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about Caufield. He was playing with a separated shoulder and I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. I mean, I think this season has led a lot of folks to think they're armchair doctors, and hopefully we don't have to do that in the future, because hopefully the Canadiens will. I know that, there's some thoughts about the medical staff needing to improve, but hopefully they'll just avoid the injury bug as badly as they've gotten it. I mean, outside of any criticisms of the medical staff, like the amount of injuries that they were faced with was like nothing we've ever seen before.
Yes. And speaking of the future a little bit in here, we're going to kind of segue out of Cole Caufield and shoulder injuries into what I'm calling mock draft 2.0 electric boogaloo, or mock draft with a vengeance, or no, just mock draft 2. Rocky 2 didn't actually have another title to it. Anyways, we're going to get into that coming up next. But first, for championship teams, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green checked into the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We are back with the crossover event of the last fortnight. It is the Build X Locked On Canadiens, and I used fortnight in a sentence. Take that, England. Ian and myself here have been talking a little bit. We were always going to do another show together, especially in this crazy time, and we will be back again, guaranteed at some point, because this offseason will not let either of us rest willfully at any time soon. We're doing Mock Draft 2.0. As many of you remember, I did a mock draft show back in, I want to say, the early parts of March when I got back from vacation, when Laura was on the other side of the world and I was hosting the show. I used FC Hockey's draft simulator to kind of go through, make my picks with the picks that are currently that the Canadiens hold through the first, second, and third round. And because the Panthers have not been eliminated or not advanced, they are still the 17th overall pick. So if the draft pick seems like it wouldn't be there at 26 or whatever afterwards, it is because I'm just going by what the computer software tells me. And I guess we'll start. We're going to do the first round, the 2 picks in the first round in this segment. And then we're going to do the second and third rounds in the final segment of the show today, just to break it up a little bit, to give you a little break from the draft talk here. And I guess I wouldn't be a very good host if I just kept talking and went first. So Ian, at 5th overall, who was your draft choice and why'd you go that route?
So for this pick, I'm going based off of what I would like to see the most, measuring it also how realistic that could be, right? So at 5th overall, and I've been very vocal about this on my own show and on Twitter, Matevi Michkov's my guy. I think you take the swing on upside. We've seen in the past too many situations where the Canadiens have a very high draft pick and they draft for floor instead of ceiling. This kid is one of the most dynamic players in this draft. All of the discussions around him falling and teams talking themselves out of him are because of where he plays in the KHL. He's there for 3 more years, as everybody knows. I think people are afraid he's going to sign an extension. Michkov himself has said it's his dream to play in the NHL, which is not something he said years ago. It's something he said in March. So, it's a reasonable thought that he's going to come here. The main fear is that the KHL and Russia, they bully him into signing another extension, which is what they did with Evgeny Malkin years ago, and the Penguins literally had to go over there and break him out. So he's at this position in the draft, likely the most dynamic player available. Could they miss on him? Of course. It's the boy auction, right? These are kids. And we're not going to see him play a professional game in North America until he's 21. There's a lot could happen between now and then. I'm not saying he's a lock to be, anything other than what he is currently. But swing for upside, Michkov's my pick.
I think it was Sean on Twitter who pointed out that it's like, okay, if you swing for it and he is kept there through things out of your control, you took the risk. You can't be, people will blame Kent Hughes for that because,
Sure.
Kent Hughes controls geopolitical politics in the KHL.
Right.
And if he gets here and he isn't as great, you still took the risk, which is something that we haven't seen. We know NHL GMs tend to be risk averse a lot. And I think kind of with the pick that I made follows that there's risk in this. I picked Will Smith at 5th overall. Anyone who's followed the show and followed me on Twitter knows Will Smith is my dream pick at 5th overall. Michkov is right there as well, based on the way things have gone, because I look at the under 18 performances. I think Smith will be gone by the time the Habs pick. And if he's not, I think Kent Hughes will be sprinting to the podium to select him. But I think that under 18 performance plus Michkov's Russian factor, contract status, whatever you want to call it, is going to drop him down the boards, rightly or wrongly. It's not really for me to say.
Sure.
But I think that's a thing that's going to happen. And someone's going to land him, and he's going to be their Kaprizov. And I've said it a lot on this show. And that should be something the Canadiens want. Could you imagine a line that has Michkov and Caufield on it?
Yeah.
Or Slafkovsky and Michkov, someone to help create in there.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities. I'm just going to jump right into the next one. Because I was at 17th overall there. There were a couple names here sitting around. I maybe potentially played this a little bit safe. I picked Colby Barlow of the Owen Sound Attack. It's really hard to argue that he has a professional level game. It is not flashy. It is not super skilled. It is just effective at what he does. I call him Brendan Gallagher with a head of hair and a beard. He looks like he's 30 and he is 18 years old. He had a rough under 18 tournament, which I think will drop him down the boards there. But if they want to go swing for the fences at 5, I'm not opposed to them playing it a little bit safer at 17th overall. And I think Colby Barlow is 100% a guy that they would look at and go, he scores goals. We've watched him play because he plays on the same team as Cedric Guindon. We've watched him play against Beck. We've watched him play against, or we've watched him play against Mayu. We know this what this guy is capable of. And I think that's absolutely a pick they would make it at 17 overall. 46 OHL goals is nothing to scoff at as a 17-year-old.
Yeah, and I think that that last part that you said about maybe going with a risk up front in that first pick, and then in the second pick maybe being a little safer. Isn't that not what they did last year? Like Slafkovsky, for what it's worth, is a risk at the pick that they took him, right? Meshar is a much safer option. I think Meshar has a more certain floor. That floor is not particularly high, but also the high end of Meshar looks pretty good. So I think that's well in line with the Canadiens' draft strategy so far.
And then look at the second round. They went Owen Beck, who might be the safest pick they could have made in that draft, and then picked Lane Hudson, who had to bring an endocrinologist note to the combine. And it's paying off so far. And I get that everyone wants to go for a superstar on every single pick. I'm not opposed to them just adding guys who make up that foundation. They might not be, the big fancy, decorations on the Christmas tree, but they can be part of that base holding everything upright in there.
Yeah, and to the point that folks think the Canadiens are really risk averse. I think that's a strategy that only really applies to their drafting, because like they was hiring Marty St. Louis as a head coach a safe thing? No, not really. He had never done it. He was coaching, a half hour from where I live in Connecticut. Was bringing in Kent Hughes, who had never worked in a front office, to be their general manager, a safe pick? No, that was a risk as well. So I mean, the Canadiens aren't an entirely risk averse franchise. I think they put a ton of value on these draft picks, and they want to make safe bets on a lot of them.
Who did you make for your pick in the first round before we transition into our next segment there, Ian?
So it's funny. So you went with Montreal potentially picking 17th, which, as the time that we're talking about, this is still possible. I went the other route. I kind of picked towards the end of that first round. So I went defense there. I took Oliver Bonk, the son of Radek Bonk, out of London.
I'm so old.
Yeah, I know, dude.
Old.
I love like Radek Bonk was unstoppable in NHL 06, and that sentence just turned me into dust. He's got decent puck skills, and I preface all of this by saying, like, I'm by no means a draft expert, a prospects expert. I read a lot, I consume a lot of information. I have people I trust that I pull information from. Bonk has decent puck skills. He's a quick decision maker from a passing perspective. He doesn't have like the quickest feet, but he makes up for it by being able to move the puck. By passing it, moving the puck through the neutral zone. Physical in his own end. I don't know as far as offense, like how much upside he has there, but a very decent right-hand shot defenseman coming out of London.
And that's honestly, like, I know Matt Drake loves Oliver Bonk. I don't expect him to be there, unfortunately, just because it is the NHL draft and people draft a lot of things. Now comes the fun part where neither of us, being prospect experts, get to put on our pretend prospect expert hats. We're picking the second and third rounds in our final segment and our methodology behind that. And that's all coming up next. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens. I am your host. I am Scott Matla, as always, and I'm joined by at Maybe It's Ian on Twitter, Ian Boisvert of the Build Podcast. We are into the second round of our 3-round mini mock draft because once we get past that point, we stop recognizing names, and we don't want to do that to any of you. Before the draft is here, I will do a full 7-round mock draft as a bonus episode for you here at Locked On Canadiens because I love you, and also editing for 45 minutes at a time. Who did you pick at second round, which I think is 37th overall?
Correct. So with this one, my podcast, The Build, I'm trying to figure out how Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton think, right? And I think that's where I went with this pick. This isn't a player that I would necessarily take here, but it's a player that I think is, one, going to be available, and two, I think they've already seen a ton of him in Maxim Stribik, right-hand shot defenseman again, very similar to Bonk from what I've read, but better. He has a little bit better skating. He's a little less physical. From the perspective of trying to be predictive of Habs, goings-ons, they've probably seen a ton of this guy. He played for Slovakia at the 2022 U20 tournament alongside Juraj Slafkovsky and Philip Mešár. So he's probably somebody that they're already very familiar with. It's human nature to go with the things that you know. I don't think I'd be disappointed with this pick. I also hope that if they do what I did and they took 2 defensemen back to back, maybe don't take a ton of defensemen later on, take some shots on maybe some undersized forwards, or what I'll do in the next pick, which we'll go into in a second. But Bob McKenzie has him 33rd overall, so he'll be right in that ballpark.
And that's the thing is I look at this and I go, it's not a name that I'd recognized before. Admittedly, I don't pay a ton of attention to the USHL. And when I used FC Hockey's way to go through this, it uses their rankings. Somehow falling into the second round to 37th overall was Samuel Honzek for me. And I just hit his profile that I wrote for Eyes on the Prize will be up not too far in the near future here. And I look at him and I go, I don't understand how he would fall that far because people have him 23rd, 15th, 46th, 13, 29, 19, 22, 9th amongst North American skaters, 13, 26, 23, 26. 6'4", uses all of that wingspan, really good in front of net, and loves to get in those areas. And he's playing in junior and he's that big, which means he is trouble for defensemen to handle. And as he grows into that frame, if he keeps the hand skills that he has and his agility on his edges there, I look at someone that you play him opposite of Slafkovsky or on a line behind him, and then you roll out Doc, Honzek, and Suzuki, Caufield, and Slafkovsky. You're going to get sick and tired of giant Slovaks in front of your net that you're going to forget about the 5'9" sniper on the other side of the ice there. I don't think he's going to fall that far. He was there, and I could not ignore that potential. Maybe on the safer side, but the upside here, his floor is already pretty damn good in the WHL. Not an easy league to score in. And he was over a point per game, and he missed time due to an injury at World Juniors. He's someone that if I'm the Canadiens and he's there in that second round, it makes too much sense. It might be safe, but I think the upside is there that you can go, nope, there is plenty of upside for me to pick here. And we're into the third round with the nicest pick in the draft. 69th overall belongs to the Montreal Canadiens. And if Kent Hughes trades this pick, I am going to throw myself off a bridge. I am not. Please do not call the police.
I think they're going to dedicate the pick to you, actually. They're going to say this one's for Scott Matla.
Well, here's the thing is we know Kent Hughes, Jeff Gordon, and Martin St. Louis have seen my tweets, which is an absolutely horrifying prospect to know. By far one of the wildest things happening in my life. But at 69th overall, through FC Hockey's rankings, and maybe he'll be there based on some of the other things here, I picked Tom Willander out of Rögle. He's playing for their under-20 team in Sweden right now. He will likely be playing on their SHL squad next year. But he's someone who has always been around that second, third-round pick. Patrick Bexell is a big fan. I know a lot of other people are as well, that I trust their judgment. And Willander is someone that I see there and I go, yes, that is a defenseman that I want. Maybe not as safe as someone else, like a Reinbacher who'd be gone further in the draft, but absolutely that if he's there, fits exactly what the Canadiens could use in their prospect pool.
Yeah, I've heard great things, and he was definitely someone that I was looking at as well. But with my pick, I went in a little bit of a different direction. Um, on so the way that I did this mock draft was the first two picks, I took who I wanted. The second pick is who I thought the Canadians would pick. And for the third round, I'm going to take a player that I think the Canadians need in their prospect pool, not necessarily this one player, but it's a positional need. And that being Scott Raslav, goaltender out of Seattle of the WHL. I'm not going to pretend I know a thing about drafting goalies because I don't. And I, even the drafting experts, like, they struggle with this, right? Because goalies are really tough to predict future results from. Um, I think the Canadians, they have some guys in the prospect pool who can potentially be NHL solutions in net. Jakob Dobish, Frederick Disho, to a lesser extent, Caden Primo. But there are some options there. There are not enough where I feel comfortable saying the Canadians have their future answer in net, right? Like, no one has really broken away from the pack. Those are just the guys that we're kind of just all hoping turn into NHL goaltenders. So taking a swing at a goalie is just something I think the Canadians are going to need to do at some point, not for the immediate future, but just you take enough swings so that in 3 to 4 years you're looking at it and saying, okay, we have a goalie who can be an NHL goalie for the foreseeable future. I know teams say all the time they don't draft for need. They're filthy liars. Of course they do. It's human nature to have an opportunity to pick something, and you, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about what you need. So I think a goalie makes sense at some point in this draft for the Canadians. I'm hoping it's kind of a little bit earlier than most. I know you can take a flyer on a late round guy, but the third round seems like a decent spot to maybe take a shot on a higher end goalie.
I'm actually looking at some of the goalies here too, and we talked about Trey Augustine with Sebastian High in an episode last week. He's in there. Ratzlaff is in there. Also on that list is Thomas Milic, who played for Team Canada at World Juniors and was really good. He is teammates with Scott Ratzlaff, which is and Seattle's notoriously a very good defensive team. And as I go down some of the names here, Adam Gajan, who was injured and didn't play a lot this year. But there's also a name that I saw was invited to rookie camp last year, and that's Riley Mercer, who played well at the rookie tournament for the Canadiens prospect team there. I thought he played pretty well amongst Verbatic and other players there. Goalies are weird. They are. I know Dobish will be in the AHL next year. Caden Primo loses his waiver eligibility, so he is subject to waivers next season now. And you have Joe Verbatic, who was on an AHL deal this year, is eligible for an entry-level contract. I don't know if they're going to let it happen. Disho needs a contract. There's a lot going on. And apparently Emma Croteau is very good. I don't know anything about goalies. Goalies are completely weird to me. And that every time the Canadians draft one, it's like, this kid had like an 887 in, Himble Burp High School, Minnesota. And I go, okay, cool. And then they go to the USHL, the NCAA. They're like, by the way, I'm actually basically Patrick Waugh. Deal with it. And I don't fully understand it. I like the idea of it. I just wonder if they go that early or if they see another offensive player and they take the risk for it. Outside of Spencer Knight, I don't recall a lot of goalies going early in drafts for the most part, but third round seems about the right time to maybe take a swing at that.
Yeah, and you mentioned Caden Primo's, waiver eligibility. It seems like that might not be an issue, but you think about it, like, he's going to be in training camp. They're going to have to waive him at some point. Like, unless there's a Jake Allen trade to be made at some point this summer, like, the clock is ticking on Caden Primo, right? Like, if he doesn't show up in camp and absolutely, you know, blow everybody out of the water, like, he's probably wearing a different uniform. Or unless I don't even know necessarily that someone would claim him, but it kind of would spell the end of his time in Montreal, at least in the short term, and potentially, longer than that. But it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, and we could talk forever about Primo and potential and all that other stuff, but we do have to wrap the show here. So run your FC hockey mock draft. Tweet it at us at LO_Canadians when you follow us on Twitter. You can follow myself at Scott Malley. You can follow my co-host at The Active Stick when she is back from her night off. You can follow Ian at Maybe It's Ian. And Ian, do you want to tell them where they can find your podcast and anything else on the internet?
Yeah, The Build. Anywhere you find podcasts, for those who are unacclimated at this point. It is a show I will cover the Montreal Canadiens. Try to do it weekly. I got sick for a little bit, couldn't do it for a while. I'll cover them weekly until they win a Stanley Cup. That is when the build will be complete. We will play closing time, and that'll be the end of that. But I don't think that's going to happen for a while. So we're safe for now.
That is a lot of podcasts. As always, Ian, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, we will be back on Monday. I know you have so many mailbag questions. Laura and I will get to them for our Monday and probably our Tuesday episode based on a bunch of them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.